Joyride 1957, Chapter 9. Next morning he rose at 8, went down and had a big breakfast of corned beef hash, eggs, and toast. He slurped down the last drops of his orange juice and laid 3 $1 bills on the table. As he stood to leave, out of the corner of his eye, he noticed a buxom blonde seated on the far side of the room. Her head was in the New York Times morning edition, obscuring her face. "Must be her," he said in a whisper. He walked out of the restaurant and up to his room. He brushed his teeth, closed his bag, and headed for the door. "When I left for breakfast, that bag was already shut," he said aloud. "I'm sure of it. Maybe somebody was in here." He looked through his bag and didn't see anything missing or even out of place. Must have been the maid, he surmised, but the room had not been cleaned. The picture of the gorgeous plus-size maid from Halifax flooded his mind. He shook his head violently, grabbed his bag, and went out the door to his car. He did look around as he got in the car, but there was no sign of the blonde or anything else suspicious. As he sat in the driver's seat, he suddenly felt wet. He had not put up the top on the Lincoln the night before and noticed the ground was moist, so was his seat. "Oh, well," he said, raising both hands in the air. He turned the key and the 300 horses roared to life. He turned right off Highway 1 onto Church Street and drove north through the town of New Haven. In a few minutes he was at the entrance to the Yale University. He could see the Harkness Tower looming high above the university. He needed to find his father's professor friend, rather the professor's son, who was also a professor of archaeology. He couldn't decide whether to go to the library or the Natural History Museum. He parked in the faculty lot and left the top on the Premier down to dry out the seats. He took his bag with him so he could hopefully get the coin and 2 rocks and whatever else his father had left at the university. Finally chose the library and went up the steps through the ancient doors. He asked if Professor Green had checked into the library, and to his surprise he had. The blonde teenage receptionist, dressed in a dark blue suit, asked him to have a seat, and she would check. After about 5 minutes he went up to the desk again. She held up one finger indicating he should wait. She then put down the phone and said, "He just finished lecturing on the Science Hill and asked if you could meet him in the Natural History Museum." "Thank you very much," he said. She winked at him and he smiled at her. He walked over to the Peabody Natural History Museum, entered and went to the reception desk. The receptionist said he would check and see if Professor Green was in his office. Presently he came back. "He's here. He's on the phone, but you can wait in his office. It is number 49, just down this hall." James looked around and took a minute to look at the massive Age of Reptiles mural and then the 110-foot Brontosaurus skeleton. James loved dinosaurs and wished he could have taken paleontology, but after the war, the Army gave him a free ride to study cartography at the Naval Academy, which he accepted. Graduated with honors 5 years ago. He secured a job in Baltimore with a cartography firm. His work was superior, and representatives from the Rand McNally in Chicago and the National Geographic in Washington, D.C. had recently contacted him. "Hi, James, is it?" Professor Green said. "It is. So good to meet you, Professor Green," James said, shaking his hand briskly. "Your letter asked if we had anything left from your father's collection. I checked, and you're in luck," Professor Green said. "Wonderful. Come with me." The professor led James down the hall. They entered a dusty room full of fossils, other artifacts, and hundreds of drawers. "Let's see, I think it was, yes, number 138. Pulled open a dusty drawer. He reached in and pulled out 2 rather odd-shaped smooth rocks, a couple inches in diameter each. They were dark and each had some rows of marks on them. He examined them carefully, rubbing off bits of dirt. "Did he say where he found them?" James said. Professor Green shook his head. "There were no letters or papers with him, and no coin, the one you mentioned in your letter. Did your father ever talk about them?" "No, just that they were here. I was off to war at 16, and he passed while I was in England." "I'm sorry. He was a great teacher," Professor Green said. "I thought the same of you," James said. "Thank you. Well, is there anything else, James?" Professor Green asked. I believe the markings on those stones may be runes, though no one has studied them to my knowledge. No, I thank you so much. May I keep these stones? By all means. I hope you can return for a more extended visit sometime in the future, Professor Green said, absent-mindedly flipping a gold coin in his pocket. I will try to do just that, James said. He shook the professor's hand, waved to Mr. Brontosaurus on his way out, and headed for Lincoln. When he arrived at the lot, he went out to the space where he had parked the Lincoln, but there was no car there. He looked around and double-checked that he was at the right spot. He then began to look around the lot. He saw a lot of nice cars, but no white Lincoln Premier convertible. He sighed. He was thankful he had taken his bag with him and made it a point to keep it with him wherever he went in the future. He looked around again and saw some nice Buicks and Pontiacs, including a cream-colored 1957 Star Chief two-door hardtop, but no Lincolns. Pontiac was only a few spaces away from where he parked the Lincoln. He went over and looked casually in the Pontiac. Saw no one in it, but no key either. He slipped in the driver's seat, felt on the dashboard for the two wires, and crossed them. The Star Chief roared to life. He put it in reverse and then eased out into traffic. He knew the gas gauge read full, so he drove south to Highway 1 South and urged the 317 horses up to speed.